Welcome, one and all, to the next game in our Metroid series retrospective, which is Super Metroid for the Super Nintendo. Considered by many to be the best game in the series. I don't think it's what I'd consider my personal favorite, but I can definitely see why it is considered the best by many other people. It is a fantastic game in its own right, and a lot of people, including myself, can see factors in which that some of its elements don't quite translate as well into the sequels as they should. And yeah, this game is just Metroidvania incarnate. Like, Metroid 1 might have created a genre, but Super Metroid more or less put it on the map. And this game is easily within my top 3 of favorite Metroid games ever. I still come back to this game and play it religiously, albeit not in the hardcore way you'd expect. I do know some of the specific uh, sequence breaks that speedrunners use, but I'm not very good at pulling it off consistently. Let's just leave it at that, because when I play a game, I generally prefer to play it for fun, and I've never really been good at consistently pulling that stuff off. So if you're coming into this Let's Play expecting something super hardcore, you'll get the knowledge, but you're not going to quite get the gameplay from it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start, because I have a really bad habit of sitting on the title screen for way too long. So let's go into controller setting mode. Let's set up our controls. And let us start our game. The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace. So, for those coming into this Let's Play from my Metroid 2 playthrough that I recently did, this is a direct follow-up to that game. Quite literally, the events that transpired at the end of Metroid 2 have a direct impact on what happens upon the startup of Super Metroid. So, right here and now, we're already kind of expanding the narrative a bit, because, you know, in the first two Metroid games, you never really had much of an explanation as to what was going on. And this game is kind enough to give us a back drop on whatever happened in the previous two games, so that way us, the player, isn't required to go back and play those games, which is perfectly fine by me, because Metroid 1 and 2 haven't exactly aged too well. In fact, Super Metroid is what I'd probably consider the first game in the series to actually stand the test of time. Just gonna be completely honest there. And I'm not gonna sit there and read all of this dialogue. It'll put quite a strain on my throat, if I'm going to be real here. Or you know what, I might make an exception here. I personally delivered it to the Galactic Federation research station at Ceres so scientists could study its energy-producing qualities. I wasn't in fear of Adam, like, retaliating against me for doing this. Thank you, Other M, for fucking retconning that. Jesus Christ. The scientists' findings were astounding. They discovered that the powers of the Metroid might be harnessed for the good of civilization. Or for corrupt government policies. Whatever way floats your boat, I guess. And quite possibly the only time in the series that Samus ever brings mention of her bounty hunting expertise, so to say. But, of course, we wouldn't be having this game without a setup, so we need to head right back to Ceres and find out what's going on. So I'm not for sure what kind of playthrough this is going to be exactly. I know for a fact this will be a 100% playthrough, much like Metroid 2 before it. Um, I'll definitely show off a few easy sequence breaks here and there, just to kind of give you guys an idea of how easily exploitable this game is. Whether or not that was intentionally put in by the developers in some way, shape, or form, I'm not entirely sure. You can interpret that for yourself. I would imagine they did, seeing as they brought this back in Zero Mission, the whole design philosophy behind that and what have you. But yeah, I mostly aim to perhaps go for a more informative playthrough in terms of like praising Super Metroid for what it is. I never really see people actually mention why Super Metroid is as great as it is. Because apart from it not being my personal favorite game in the series, I can definitely see why it can be for many other fans. And truth be told, I don't think this game is overrated as some people claim it to be. So right off the bat, we are pretty much in a situation where we can't really control the outcome of what's happening as of right now. Ridley is back from Metroid 1. In what way, shape, or form? I don't really know. But fun fact, if you actually shoot Ridley enough, he will like automatically drop the Metroid. So just a little Easter egg for those curious, I suppose. And we have our escape sequence. And, there was an escape sequence at the end of Metroid 1. But I think it was definitely Metroid 2 that more or less established that this was going to be a recurring theme. In fact, Super Metroid is what I would probably consider to be, like, the mishmash of elements that the creators more or less took and melded the best elements of both Metroid 1 and 2 together, especially 2. And they basically found out what worked. This is pretty much a perfection of the formula. Whereas, like, later games are simply just expansions upon it without trying to fix anything, I feel. But, yeah. Seeing as this feels, more or less like a direct sequel to, Metroid 1 than it does Metroid 2 in some aspects, especially saying that not too many people played Metroid 2 in comparison to Metroid 1, I think they felt it safe to start things off at Planet Zebes again, maybe? Planet Zebes is nothing like it was in the original, though, I can tell you that right now. Aside from a few exceptions we'll be seeing here in a bit. I definitely love the way this game starts off, though. Like, the way you start off at Ceres already setting in the tone of isolation. Because you're going into an abandoned research lab. Or not really abandoned, but you can tell everybody's dead. The suspense is already kind of building up because of the way Ridley showed up and more or less wreaked havoc on the station. Or what's implied of it anyway. And then you're coming here into Zebes, everything's so quiet, dead. You're coming into territory you've seen before, as we're seeing right here and now, going through Turan. It's a familiar retreading of both old and new. It's like they can definitely tell that there were fans of Metroid 1, more so than of Metroid 2. And they wanted to make it feel like a direct sequel, but without like alienating the people who more or less didn't play it, as indicated by the opening. It's like I don't know, like I don't really see many narratives that appeal to both sides of the coin in terms of like trying to introduce players to the series. But alas, despite what the atmosphere here may forebode in terms of its isolation, we can definitely tell that we are not the only ones here on this planet, as indicated by that camera. Super Metroid just sets up everything so well. And I think, like, the storyline here, in terms of its progressive narrative, this is, like, the point in the series where the narrative really starts to make a huge impact on the gameplay. Because Super Metroid aims for what I feel would be described as a progressive narrative or a gameplay narrative, in the sense that going through the planet itself and just seeing like the environments that Samus had treaded through already, everything being kind of quiet, isolated and what have you. It's definitely setting in the motion here pretty well for what's about to happen here in a bit. And this design philosophy is more or less used in later games as well, especially the Prime games. And there's more moments like that as we progress through the game as well. So, yeah, the narrative really hits home here. So, not much there to get besides a few missiles and a morph ball, or as this game likes to call it, the morph ball, or the morphing ball rather. And the first appearance of space pirates. It kind of seems weird to me that they just now decided to put space pirates into a Metroid game. Because, like, you know, in Metroid 1 and 2, you never really saw the space pirates at all. And here, they don't really play much of a role in the narrative either. They're just kind of like the underlings that you see throughout, like, the surface and under the surface. But now you can definitely tell just from seeing these guys alone that you have a group of antagonists right on your tail. And they're pretty pissed that you're back and here to take whatever they thought was rightfully theirs. And wow, I actually made it up that whole vertical hallway with perfect wall jumps. I normally don't accomplish that in most other subsequent playthroughs, but yeah, that happened to be an exception there and now. Because I'm not very good at pulling off wall jumps consistently, contrary to what you saw earlier. Just gonna grab a few missiles because we're about to have our first mini-boss fight. I don't plan to leave you guys out on the dark too much because Super Metroid is one of those games that have been LP'd to and fro and back and beyond. It's one of those LP sins, I'm aware. Like, it's kind of in the same category of games like Super Mario 64 and Zelda Ocarina of Time where people have LP'd this game to death already. And I know I've had my fair share of times where I've LP'd this many a time, both on my old channel and other channels as well. So, Let's Playing Super Metroid isn't entirely foreign to me. So, if I don't provide what you're looking for in terms of unique Metroid playthroughs, I apologize in advance, I guess, because I know Let's Playing a game that's been done to death can definitely seem more difficult than it should be. But I'm gonna try to meld this as best as I can in terms of like talking about the individual like seg pieces and how they're done so well in terms of its narrative and progression, and also just like the level design. Because ooh god, the level design in Super Metroid, apart from its atmosphere, is fantastic, and a lot of that plays into the different paths you can take to accomplish multiple directives and objectives. And it's a reason I visit Super Metroid a lot, like, because there's just so many different ways to play this game, man. It's like there's a reason people still play this game in 2017. It is a fantastic masterpiece. And anybody who says otherwise is more or less just saying it because they're part of a bandwagon or some shit. I don't know. The same way people hate, like, Final Fantasy VII and Ocarina of Time for no good reason other than to just hate on it because everybody else loves it. But I don't think Super Metroid is in the same category as those set games, so I can't really quite put it in the same boat. So one speedrunning trick I'm gonna see if I can try to implement right now is the mock ball. One of many different speedrunning tricks. So this involves me running through the door and jumping on the last frame I go through the hatch, and initiating Morph Ball the moment I land. And what this does is that upon landing going into Morph Ball from a running jump, basically I retain my momentum from running and jumping, and that speed will build into my Morph Ball and allow me to basically outpace this hatch here that's closing. If I don't get it within the next 2 or so times, I'm probably just gonna basically forget about it. Again, I am no sequence break god. I simply know about the sequence breaks, but my execution of them is quite piss poor. Or not! Or not! Or not! Oh my god! Well then. So, basically what I just did there is that not only did I get a few extra missiles early on, I'm about to get an upgrade I shouldn't be getting this early on in the game. Basically, I'm supposed to be meeting a mini-boss to get this upgrade that'll allow me to proceed to the next area, but we might just skip that mini-boss altogether. I'm not quite sure yet. I'll decide between this and the next part, but yeah. Wow. I'm playing much better than I would be normally in my test playthroughs. This is so weird. I guess this is probably because I'm playing this on a Super Nintendo controller, and I'm just now remembering how good the Super Nintendo controller feels in my hands. Like, oh my god. Like, this controller feels so much better than it does playing it on the Virtual Console or the Super Boy. In fact, I'm actually glad that I decided not to do the Virtual Console version now that I think about it. I am legit playing this straight up off of my Super Nintendo, so what you see from the game initially, from its initial release, is what you get here. I am going for a 100% authentic playthrough. So, with that being said, we got the Super Missiles early. This is their first debut, and they're pretty much just a stronger, slower version of the missiles that we got earlier. And they can be used to open up green hatches and also destroy certain blocks. And you also collect far less of them than you would with normal missiles. But anywho, next up on Let's Play Super Metroid, we're going to explore more of this new side of Brinstar, I suppose. Again, Super Metroid introduces both elements old and new, and introduces it so seamlessly. So, yeah, until next time, my fellow bounty hunters, fare thee well.